He showed up with his new fiancée arm wrapped tight around her waist, smug grin on his face, just as the room went quiet. No one missed the way he looked at his ex-wife, like she was the joke of the night. But when she turned around, something in the air shifted. People leaned in. He leaned back. And suddenly, he wasn't so sure who the joke was on anymore. If you've ever seen someone underestimated until they didn't need to prove anything at all, stick around. Like, subscribe or share if this stirs something in you. It's just getting started. Essex House stood like a quiet monument along Central Park South, its glass and limestone facade reflecting the city's wealth in silence. Inside, the lobby held the kind of polish that didn't welcome fingerprints. Every step on its marble echoed softly, as if to remind guests of the price of admission. Olivia West stepped through the revolving door just after 10:30, her heels clicking softly, her presence precise but unadorned. She wore a gray sheath dress, modestly tailored, paired with a navy coat and a pair of black flats she trusted on unpredictable streets. Her hair was pinned in a low twist, no jewelry except a plain silver ring on her right hand. She carried a leather folio and the kind of poise that looked practiced but not inherited. She didn't belong here and she knew it, but she wasn't here to belong. At the front desk, a young receptionist glanced up from her monitor, smile pre-installed. Then the smile faltered, not rudely, just instinctively. She scanned Olivia's outfit, took in the lack of makeup, the absence of a designer handbag, and recalibrated the tone of her voice. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Olivia said. "I'm here to inquire about the East Room. I work with a nonprofit group. We're looking for a venue for a local scholarship fundraiser in June. I called yesterday. They said I could take a look." The receptionist nodded too quickly, already glancing at her screen. Name of the organization: Bright Path Education Trust. Right. Let me just check. The woman tapped a few keys, then reached for the small earpiece tucked behind her hair. Olivia waited, listening to the low hum of a coffee machine in the lounge behind her, the faint squeak of luggage wheels crossing the marble. A moment later, the receptionist looked up. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. The East Room is currently closed for a private event. Would it be possible to just walk by and peek in through the glass?" Olivia asked, voice calm. "I'll be quick." The receptionist hesitated, glanced to her left. From the service corridor, a man appeared, a floor manager by the cut of his blazer, and the way he walked, like the lobby, owed him order. He approached with the calm efficiency of someone used to redirecting people without making a scene. "Good morning," he said. "May I ask your name?" "Olivia West." He didn't write it down. "Unfortunately, Ms. West, we've had to restrict access to all event spaces today due to security arrangements. I apologize, but we're not able to allow anyone without prior clearance into that wing." "I understand," Olivia replied, after a small breath. "Thank you for your time." There was nothing in her tone that asked for reconsideration. No edge, no bitterness, just a withdrawal, measured and intact. She turned to leave, passing through the archway between the lobby and the cafe area. That was when she saw him, Michael Whitaker. He stood at a tall marble table near the cafe bar, coffee in hand, posture still impeccable in a navy suit. His hair was shorter than she remembered, but the self-assurance hadn't aged a day. He didn't notice her at first, not until Jessica leaned in, said something playful, and he laughed that short, dismissive laugh Olivia had once known too well. Then he looked past Jessica's shoulder and froze. His gaze met Olivia's for a second. She gave no reaction, no smile, no acknowledgement. Her steps didn't slow. Jessica turned to follow his line of sight. "Who's that?" Michael's voice came quiet. "That's Olivia." Jessica raised her brows. "Your ex-wife." He gave a slight nod. Jessica studied the woman now walking toward the exit. "She's beautiful," she said, almost involuntarily. Michael didn't answer. He was still watching. Something about Olivia's posture, the way she moved, as if she needed no one's permission, unsettled him more than he expected. Jessica asked, "What's she doing here?" probably still chasing those charity projects of hers, he said, but his voice lacked its usual sharpness. Olivia stepped back out onto the sidewalk. She didn't hurry. She didn't pull out her phone. For a moment, she stood under the awning, the buzz of New York washing past her. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and took out a folded piece of stationery. It was cream-colored, slightly worn at the creases. The return address read Detroit Public High School Alumni Association. Across the top, in neat print, 20-year class reunion. Her fingers hovered over the RSVP line. Blank. She refolded it, slid it back into her pocket. Inside, Michael was still staring at the door, coffee cooling in his hand. Jessica had gone back to her phone, scrolling. A jazz trio began to set up in the lounge, their instruments unhurried. Somewhere between the high ceilings and the polished walls, a silence settled that didn't quite belong. Olivia didn't look back, but someone inside the lobby did. And for the first time in years, Michael wasn't sure if he'd already lost or never stood a chance. The apartment Olivia shared with James sat on the 4th floor of a pre-war walk-up in Park Slope. It was small, with creaky floors and windows that hissed when it rained, but it was hers, the kind of space that carried quiet on its back like a familiar coat. The kind of place that didn't pretend to be more than it was. She stepped in, dropped her leather bag gently onto the worn armrest of the couch, then slid off her shoes without a sound. Her toes pressed into the cool wood as she walked toward the kitchen, following the soft smell of thyme and slow-cooked carrots. James stood at the stove in shirt sleeves, stirring soup. His sleeves were rolled just above the elbow. He looked over his shoulder at her, not startled, just present. "You're back early," he said. "I wasn't invited to stay," she replied, voice low but even. She poured herself a glass of water, leaned against the counter. He waited, didn't press. That was James. He left space. Across the small dining table, a cream-colored envelope sat unopened. She saw it, knew what it was before she picked it up. It had been sitting there for a week now. She peeled it open without ceremony. A formal crest across the top, Detroit Public High School Alumni Association. She read it once, slowly. Then again. Her name written with a ballpoint pen across the top of the RSVP line. Her maiden name, Olivia M. West. James ladled soup into 2 bowls, set them down. "Will you go?" She sat, folded the invitation and placed it neatly beside her bowl. "Probably not." James didn't look surprised. Any reason in particular? She spooned the broth, tasted it. "No one there ever really knew me, and those who did didn't want to." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "But maybe that's changed." She looked up at him. "You ever walk into a room and feel it was already decided you didn't belong?" He nodded, many times. She didn't smile, but her gaze softened. In the living room, above a narrow bookshelf, hung a photograph in a thin black frame, a group shot from high school students in cap and gown, rows of teenage faces smiling too big or not at all. Olivia was in the back row, barely visible behind 2 taller boys. Her expression was small and unsure, the corners of her mouth turning up like she was trying to believe she fit. She stared at that photo a long time after dinner, one hand absently holding her tea. James had gone to make a call, his voice muffled behind the bedroom door. Across the city, Michael stood in a luxury condo on the Upper East Side, pulling jackets from his closet. He held 2 blazers up to the light and turned to Jessica. "Which one?" he asked. Jessica pointed to the darker one. "You look more powerful in that." Michael smirked, tossed the other one aside. "Perfect." Jessica looked at him curiously. "Why is this reunion so important to you?" He turned to adjust his cufflinks. "Because Olivia will be there, and it's time she sees what she gave up." Jessica tilted her head. "You sure she'll come?" Michael didn't answer at first. Then he said, "She'll come. That woman can't resist the chance to prove something." Jessica returned to her makeup mirror, brushing highlighter across her cheekbone. To who Michael straightened, looking at himself in the mirror, but what he saw wasn't as clear as it had been moments ago. Back in Brooklyn, Olivia stood by the window, invitation in hand. The city buzzed below like it always did, horns, wind, footsteps that never slowed. She was still holding the envelope when she sat down at her desk and pulled a pen from the drawer. She didn't fill in the RSVP line, but she didn't throw it away either. Detroit Public High School looked different, but it still sounded the same. The parking lot had new pavement and fresh white lines. The entryway gleamed with recent renovations. Someone had even planted low shrubs beside the front stairs. But the air, the way it held distant echoes of slammed lockers, basketball whistles, and hallway laughter, hadn't changed at all. Olivia stood under the canopy for a moment before going in. She adjusted the strap of her small purse, checked the time, then pushed the door open. Inside, familiar banners lined the walls. Go Wolves, class of '03, once a grad, always a grad. The nostalgia was both dull and sharp, like hearing an old song and remembering who you were when it first played. She had arrived just 20 minutes after the official start time, enough to avoid being the first, late enough that people would already be clustered, distracted. She didn't want a spotlight. She only wanted to walk through it like walking through a memory, just to prove to herself it didn't own her anymore. The gymnasium had been converted into a reception hall for the night. Round tables draped in navy cloths filled the space. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a photo booth stood near the entrance, already collecting goofy props and printed strips. As Olivia stepped inside, conversations dipped, not in rudeness. Just in that way, people go quiet when something shifts. Some faces turned. Some lingered longer than polite. Others did a double take, then quickly looked away. She kept walking. Her dress was again gray subtle, tasteful, and deliberate. Hair pinned back. No jewelry besides a pair of small pearl studs. She wore flats, the kind you can stand in all night without complaint. The kind women who've been underestimated often choose. Michael saw her first. He was near the DJ booth, holding a tumbler of something brown. Jessica beside him in a satin emerald dress that caught every bit of gymnasium lighting. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, not quite in surprise, just something caught between. He leaned toward Jessica, whispered something. She smiled, turned, and began walking toward Olivia. "Olivia," she said, a bit too brightly, "you look very different." Olivia met her eyes, calm. Time does that. Jessica laughed softly, unsure whether it was a compliment. "I almost didn't recognize you." "That's all right," Olivia replied. "I'm not here to be remembered." Jessica stepped aside as Cheryl approached. Cheryl had been Michael's closest friend in high school, sometimes a girlfriend depending on the month. Her expression carried curiosity more than warmth. She looked Olivia up and down, then said with a thin smile, "So, I heard you got married again. Is that true?" Before Olivia could answer, Michael's voice floated in from just behind Cheryl. "Let me guess," he said, "a teacher, or maybe someone you met at a fundraiser." His tone was casual, but there was a static underneath it, like a wire that hummed just before it sparked. Olivia turned toward him, eyes steady. "Something like that," she said. Jessica laughed, too loudly this time. "Michael always jokes like that. You know how he is." "I do," Olivia said. And for a second, her voice carried a coolness that silenced the conversation around them. An old classmate called from across the gym, waving Olivia over. She offered a small nod, then walked away from the trio, her posture unshaken. Michael watched her go, glass still in hand, but no longer sipping. Jessica looked at him. "She's not what I expected." He didn't respond, not right away. "She's not what I remembered, either." The air inside the gym had started to turn warm. Laughter drifted through in fits and starts. Near the snack table, someone knocked over a cup of punch. A small cheer went up when a favorite song from senior year came on. For a moment, the evening resumed its rhythm, but it only took a single presence to shift everything again. James Richardson entered the room without fanfare, no announcement, no entourage, just a steady walk. His coat folded neatly over one arm, his dark navy suit crisp against the dimmed string lights overhead. His tie was narrow, understated, and his shoes were the kind that didn't make sound, but always left an impression. Olivia saw him before anyone else did. She didn't move, but something in her shoulders lifted. A quiet realignment, like someone returning to familiar gravity. James's eyes found hers quickly, without searching, and as he crossed the floor, people began to turn first out of curiosity, then with a strange hush that traveled through the crowd. Michael noticed him too, just as he was about to take another sip of bourbon. The glass paused mid-air. He narrowed his eyes, processing the face he'd only ever seen on screen's Forbes features, business panels, congressional testimony on wealth equity, James Richardson, CEO of Hightower Investments, the kind of man who didn't belong at a high school gym reunion unless he was scouting for a school to buy and rename. But there he was, and he was walking straight toward Olivia. Jessica leaned in toward Michael. "Wait, isn't that—" Michael didn't answer. James reached Olivia, nodded once, not formally but gently. He didn't kiss her cheek or make a statement, just stood next to her as if he'd always been there. Olivia looked up at him with a soft smile, something private in it, and touched his wrist briefly. Michael stepped forward. "James Richardson," he said. "Wasn't expecting to see you here." James turned, extended his hand with no pretense. "Michael." Their handshake was brief. James didn't linger, didn't explain his presence. Olivia stood calmly between them, watching, not intervening. She didn't need to. Michael cleared his throat. "Interesting crowd for someone like you." James met his gaze. "It's her crowd." Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "So you two, what is this? Just visiting old ghosts?" James didn't reply. Instead, he turned to Olivia. "I'll wait for you outside. No rush." She nodded. "I won't be long." He left with the same quiet he'd arrived in. Michael watched him go, something unsettled in his posture. Then, as if trying to recover ground, he turned back to Olivia. "So that's the man." Olivia looked at him, her voice steady. "That's the man." Michael laughed. Too short, too hollow. "Good for you." He didn't mean it. A memory returned to him suddenly years ago, a late-night conversation with his father about Hightower's acquisition of a failing educational foundation. He hadn't cared about the details then, just nodded as his father explained that the small nonprofit in Detroit was a waste of capital. He remembered the name now, Midtown Educators Alliance, and vaguely, a woman's name in the paperwork. West. It clicked. He looked at Olivia, and for the first time that night, he realized he hadn't just lost something. He'd helped destroy it. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look back as she turned away. But something in his chest told him the past had never really been buried. It had just waited until he was no longer strong enough to pretend it didn't matter. The air outside was cooler than Olivia expected. Autumn had taken a firm hold of the trees, leaving rust-colored leaves scattered across the schoolyard. The noise from the reunion, clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, background music stuck in the early 2000s, faded behind her as she stepped onto the concrete steps. She took a slow breath and looked around. The basketball court was still painted in the same faded blue. The maple tree near the west wing still leaned a little to the left. Beneath it, an old bench sat stubborn and worn. She walked toward it, shoes crunching gently against the gravel, until she reached the spot where memory felt the strongest. This was where her mother used to wait, her senior year. The final parent-teacher conference had ended with her mother holding a printed termination letter in one hand and a folded tissue in the other. Olivia remembered how she hadn't asked any questions. She was 17, angry, and too young to understand the weight of dignity. She sat on the bench now, rested her hands in her lap, and stared out across the empty yard. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps not rushed, just steady. James approached, holding 2 paper cups of water. He handed her one without speaking and sat beside her. Not too close. They sat in silence for a while, letting the wind talk instead. Then he asked, gently, "Want to walk?" She nodded. They left the bench and followed the edge of the court, passing by the bleachers and the rusted fence that still bore carved initials from students long gone. She loved this place, Olivia said. My mother. She taught here 20 years. Art teacher. Said some kids just needed a paintbrush in their hand to remember they were still human. James listened. She got laid off during budget cuts. Her program was the first to go. Olivia's voice stayed flat, but her hands tightened slightly around the cup. I remember her saying it wasn't personal, but she cried in the car all the way home. She sounds like someone I would have liked to meet. James said, she would have liked you too. Once she got over what you do for a living, that made him smile, then made him quiet again. Near the old loading dock, a group of high school volunteers were packing up leftover decorations from earlier. One girl, no older than 15, dropped a box of paper fans. The contents spilled across the pavement. James didn't hesitate. He walked over, crouched, and began helping her gather them. No fuss, no small talk for show. The girl smiled shyly. Thanks, sir. James nodded. You did a good job tonight. It looks great in there. Olivia watched from a few steps away. The way he crouched, not looming, not correcting. The way he handed her each paper fan like it still mattered. It felt strangely intimate, like seeing someone without them realizing they're being seen. They walked back toward the lot where James had parked. Streetlights buzzed overhead, flickering as the breeze shook the power lines. Olivia stopped at the passenger door and looked at him. I didn't expect you to come tonight, she said. I know. He unlocked the car, held the door for her. She hesitated a moment before sliding in. Inside the car, warmth returned slowly. James drove quietly for a few blocks. Olivia stared out the window, fingers absent-mindedly twisting the edge of a tissue from her coat pocket. Something fluttered to the floor, a photograph. He reached down and picked it up. It was an old picture, slightly creased at the corners. Her mother, in front of a blackboard, chalk in hand, a smile on her face, proud, unbothered, the kind of smile you wear when you know you've done your job, whether anyone thanks you or not. James stared at the image for a second longer than he meant to. Then he handed it back without a word. Olivia took it, slid it into the visor above her head. Her voice came quiet. She used to say that dignity doesn't live in big wins. It lives in the way you stand after a small loss. James nodded. I think she was right. The red light ahead changed to green. The car rolled forward, and somewhere in that silence, something in Olivia began to loosen. Rivera Community Arts Center sat at the corner of Cass and West Grand Boulevard, in a red brick building that used to be a bakery. Now it buzzed with the soft chaos of children's voices and the steady movement of volunteers laying out watercolor kits and folding chairs. The walls wore color, like a promise murals of jazz musicians. Garden scenes, city skylines melted in strokes that refused to be forgotten. Olivia stepped inside with her students, 7 kids, ages 9 to 12, all part of the inclusive learning program she'd helped launch at Westfield Elementary. Each of them carried a tote bag and an easel under one arm. The center smelled faintly of acrylic and warm paper. It felt like memory wrapped in potential. This was her 3rd visit to Rivera, but it was the first time she brought students with her. Today was the Community Art Day, an open session where children could paint freely. Guided by only one instruction, draw someone who made you feel safe. A few feet away, a tall man in a charcoal sweater stood with the center director, scanning the layout, James. Olivia didn't know he'd be here. No one had said anything, and she hadn't asked. But the moment she saw him, something in her chest relaxed before her mind could catch up. She gave him a small nod, unsure what else to do. He nodded back, then returned to a quiet conversation with the program coordinator. Olivia set up her group, pulling out aprons and setting jars of water on tables. The projector on the back wall flickered. She glanced over her shoulder slides of children's artwork, rotated to serve as inspiration for the new arrivals. Then the screen went black. A few staff members huddled near the connection box. Someone muttered about the HDMI port. One of the volunteers ran off to find the tech guy, who apparently wasn't answering his phone. Olivia walked toward the projector, trying to stay calm. She checked the outlet, turned the power off, then on again, still black. And then James stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He just crouched beside the cable cluster, examined the junctions, disconnected a few wires, reconnected them, and pressed 2 buttons in succession. The screen blinked once, then the slideshow returned, brighter than before. A ripple of applause went up from the kids. James stood, brushing his palms off, and turned to Olivia. She couldn't help it. She laughed, really laughed, the kind that rose from somewhere low in the ribs, the kind she hadn't heard from herself in months. He smiled, only slightly, but she caught it. They didn't talk much after that, just stood on the side as the children painted. Some painted rainbows, others drew their pets or their homes. But one boy, Jerome, painted a pair of people, a tall man in a blue sweater and a woman with her hair pinned back, standing side by side, smiling in front of a wall of flowers. Jerome turned his canvas to Olivia. "This is you," he said, tapping the woman, "and that's him." He nodded toward James. Olivia looked at the painting, then at Jerome. "You think so?" Jerome shrugged. "You laugh when he's around. That's how I know." James stepped closer to peek at the canvas. Jerome squinted up at him. "You're her husband, right?" Olivia opened her mouth, but didn't answer. James looked down at Jerome. "Almost," he said. "Close enough." Jerome seemed satisfied. He returned to coloring the man's shoes brown. Behind them, one of the teen volunteers, holding a bundle of empty water cups, nudged her friend and whispered, "Are they, like, a thing?" Her friend smiled. "I think they're more than a thing." The afternoon stretched in the way good days do, without hurry, without expectation. The room filled with art, with motion, with color. Olivia stood beside James, arms crossed, watching her students discover what their hands were capable of. She didn't lean in, didn't touch him, but her shoulder was just close enough that if the wind blew, they'd meet, and James didn't step away. The elevator ride to the 31st floor of Hightower Investments was quiet except for the soft hum of classical music piped through hidden speakers. Olivia stood at James's side, her reflection faint in the steel doors. She wore a pearl gray silk blouse tucked into charcoal trousers, flats instead of heels. Her hair was pulled back, and her makeup was minimal. She hadn't tried to fit in. She hadn't tried to stand out either. The executive suite opened onto a reception area of glass and steel, softened only by tasteful abstract art and a wall of fresh orchids. Olivia stepped in and immediately felt it, the stillness that follows when people clock the presence of someone unexpected. Eyes lifted, paused, moved on. James greeted the assistant, signed something, and gestured Olivia toward a smaller conference room. "Just an internal presentation," he said. "You don't have to say a word." "I wasn't planning to," she replied gently. Inside, 12 people sat around a gleaming walnut table. Suits, watches, laptops already open. One woman glanced at Olivia's shoes, then back to her screen. Another man whispered something to the colleague next to him, who chuckled behind his hand. They didn't say her name. They didn't need to. James introduced Olivia as an educator and advisor in community partnership models. It was true, though no one in the room knew what it meant. Midway through the meeting, during a debate over restructuring their education endowment, a board member leaned back, eyes on James. "You've always had good instincts." "James, I just didn't know they extended to social work." His tone was light, but not kind. Another man added with a chuckle, "I always thought your type wore Harvard on their sleeve." James didn't respond immediately. Olivia heard every word. She looked at James, but he hadn't moved, just listened, measured, across the room. A young staffer with a coffee tray stood awkwardly at the doorway. Olivia offered him a quiet smile, nodding once. The kind of gesture that says, "I see you," in a place where most people don't. The meeting ended politely. The conversation, less so, later, in the executive lounge. James stood by the window, arms folded, watching the gray sweep of the Chicago River below. The city stretched outward like a grid of purpose, cold and efficient. Olivia joined him, her voice soft but clear. You invited me here so I'd feel out of place, didn't you? He turned to her, eyes steady. No, I invited you so they'd see how small their world is. She looked away, jaw tight. That room, she said, it still talks in code, like I'm supposed to ask permission to exist. He nodded once. That's why I brought you. They left without ceremony. The elevator ride down was quieter than the one up. In the car, neither spoke. Chicago passed outside the window, its streets washed in late afternoon gold, horns honked. A man pushed a cart full of laundry across the crosswalk. Life moved on in layers, some invisible to the room they'd just left. When they reached Olivia's neighborhood, tree-lined, older, with porches and cracked sidewalks, James slowed the car near her building. She reached for the handle, but he touched her hand lightly, not to stop her, just to say he wasn't quite done. I have a follow-up session at Rivera next week, he said. I thought maybe you'd want to come. She looked at him, long enough that he felt the weight of the moment. Then she said, this time, maybe you walk into my world first. She stepped out and closed the door gently behind her. The Rivera Community Arts Center was alive with color that morning. Paint trays clattered, children laughed, and the scent of poster board and washable markers filled the air like a kind of joy. Olivia moved between tables, her sleeves rolled up, apron streaked with yellow and green. Her class this week was simple: draw something that helps you feel brave. It was just after 10 when James arrived. No fanfare, no announcement. He stepped in through the side entrance wearing a pale blue dress shirt with the sleeves folded to his elbows, khakis, and old sneakers Olivia hadn't seen before. For a man used to glass towers and policy briefings, he blended surprisingly well. A few parents noticed him. One or two looked longer than the rest. One even tilted her head, whispering something under her breath. But James didn't flinch. Instead, he walked straight to the sink, picked up a cloth, and began wiping stray paint from the chairs the kids had dragged into odd places. One of the volunteers blinked at him, unsure whether to stop him or thank him. Near the back of the room, Olivia looked up, caught sight of him, and didn't say a word. She just gave the smallest nod, then turned back to help a boy outline a dinosaur in blue chalk. The shift was subtle, but it was there. Kids started pointing. A few parents drifted closer. James helped a child open a jammed glue bottle. He rethreaded twine into a hanging project that had fallen from the wall. And when little Elsie, 6 years old, big eyes, the bravest of them all, walked up to him with her drawing, he crouched to her level like it was the most important thing he'd done all day. She held up her paper, a stick-figure girl with a ponytail, next to a tall man holding her hand. Are you the one who holds Miss Olivia's hand when she's sad? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. James glanced at Olivia across the room. He smiled, then looked back at Elsie. I try to keep it steady, he said, later, during cleanup. Olivia and James worked side by side, sweeping, recapping paint, gathering brushes. It was a quiet rhythm between them, comfortable in a way neither needed to explain. An older woman in a denim jacket and floral scarf approached Olivia while James was rinsing out cups. She leaned in, speaking low. That man looks at you like you're the only calm he's seen all week. Olivia didn't respond, but something in her softened. As the last tables were stacked, Olivia reached up to return a bin of construction paper to the top shelf of an old cabinet. The shelf jammed. She tugged gently, and an old manila folder dropped to the floor. Papers spilled out. She bent to gather them, and then froze. Among the pages was a letter dated April 2002, a grant request from Detroit Unified Arts Initiative, signed by Janice West Olivia's mother. Her application had been declined. The final page bore a single stamp from the reviewing funder, Whittaker Foundation, denied. Olivia stared at the paper. Her hands didn't move. The name wasn't smudged. It wasn't faded. James stepped over, noticing the silence. You okay? She didn't look up. This was my mother's. He read the page. His face didn't change, but the air around him did. like something shifted beneath the surface. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't either," Olivia answered, still staring at the signature. Neither said more. She folded the page, slowly, slid it back into the folder, then placed it on the corner of the nearest table. James didn't press. He just stood beside her, waiting, as if this was another one of those quiet moments where words didn't heal, presence did. She walked to the sink, washed her hands, dried them slowly. James was still there when she turned. The small office at Rivera felt colder than usual. Olivia sat with her arms wrapped around herself, though it wasn't the temperature that chilled her. The fluorescent light above flickered faintly, casting a sterile glow on the papers spread before her. At the center lay the grant rejection letter dated, signed, and sealed with the name she hadn't noticed until now. Whitaker Foundation. She read it again, then again. Her fingers pressed along the crease where the paper had been folded for years, the ink slightly smudged but still legible. That name had once meant nothing more than wealth and influence in a world distant from her own. Now, it meant a fracture that had begun long before her own heartbreak. It meant the door that closed on her mother's classroom, the chalk that stopped halfway through a sentence. She didn't hear James enter. He moved quietly, hands dusty from helping the kids clean out the art closet, his shirt slightly wrinkled, hair a bit damp with effort. When he reached the doorframe and saw the paper in Olivia's hand, he stopped. She didn't look at him. "Do you know who ran this foundation?" Her voice was even, too even. Not cold worse, controlled. James nodded slowly. "My father." The words landed like a dropped pane of glass. No crash, just the shiver after. Olivia didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked on the letter. The air between them turned heavier. "You should have told me," she said. "No sharpness, just fact." "I know." He took a step inside. "I meant to. Every time I thought I should, it was right after you'd smiled at me, and I didn't want to lose that. I thought I had time to earn your trust before I broke it. You didn't," she replied. She placed the paper down, carefully, as though setting down something fragile. "It's already broken." She stood. The chair creaked behind her. James didn't move to stop her as she crossed the room. His shoulders dropped, just a fraction. Her hand touched the doorknob. "I didn't know then," he said quietly. "I didn't know what that grant meant, what your mother meant to this place. I saw her name once, years ago, in a report. I didn't understand what I was looking at." Olivia paused, one foot out the door. "But you knew who I was, and still, you didn't say. I was afraid if I did, you'd leave." Her grip tightened on the knob. "I'm leaving anyway." She stepped out into the hallway. Rain tapped gently against the center's windows, the soft kind that made the city smell like wet pavement and old stories. James remained where he was, standing in a room full of quiet echoes. His eyes drifted to the wall. There, in a simple black frame, was the photograph of Olivia's mother, Janice West, smiling beside a chalkboard, sleeves rolled up, hand mid-gesture, teaching something you couldn't quite hear but somehow still felt. He stared at the photo a long time. Outside, the rain thickened. Olivia pulled her coat tighter, walking down the sidewalk without looking back. Not yet. For 3 days. Olivia didn't answer her phone. The silence wasn't meant to punish, it was a shield, one she'd built years ago and could still reach for with muscle memory. She buried herself in work, teaching, organizing lesson plans, staying late to help students scan forms and write essays. At Detroit Public High School, she sat with a student whose right hand trembled when he wrote. She studied his paper while he signed the form for a scholarship she never got to apply for herself. In that quiet moment, she didn't think of James. She thought of her mother, of chalk-stained skirts, of afternoons spent tracing letters across a page, too fast for a teacher trying to save a job already gone. Then the thought did come James, in the hallway of Rivera, with guilt in his eyes and silence in his mouth. He didn't call, didn't text, but he acted at Rivera's main office, James met with the director in private. He didn't mention Olivia's name, didn't ask for a plaque, or a headline, or a thank you. He offered one thing: full funding for the art program her mother once led, no expiration, no publicity. His only request: make it free, let it stay open, let the kids come. Then he left. That same week, he visited the Oak Ridge care home on the north side of town. Olivia's mother lived there now, her memory sometimes sharp, sometimes slipping like morning fog. James didn't wear a suit. He didn't bring a speech, just a canvas-bound sketchbook, soft at the edges from use, and a note tucked inside the front cover. It read, "I can't undo what my family did, but I can carry part of it forward. This belonged to you." The nurse didn't ask questions. Olivia's mother recognized the sketchbook immediately. Her fingers traced the cover like a memory long buried. Later that afternoon, she dialed Olivia's number from the front desk. "Your husband came by," she said, voice steady. "Didn't say much, didn't explain or apologize. He just brought back something your father gave me, and I thought I'd lost forever." Olivia held the phone to her ear, listening to the quiet hum of the care home behind her mother's voice. Her throat didn't tighten, her eyes didn't burn, but her hand grew cold around the receiver. She didn't reply right away. At home, the sun cast long shadows across her kitchen table. She looked at the mug James had once used, still sitting in the dish rack, untouched since she washed it 3 days ago. Her fingers hovered over it, then pulled away. She had told herself the silence was necessary, that she needed space to think, but she wasn't thinking. She was remembering how hard she had fought to never be rescued, how many times she'd stood on her own, built things from scratch just to prove she didn't need anyone. Especially not someone who came from the very name that had broken her family's chances. But this, what he did, wasn't love, not the grand, sweeping kind. It was something else, quiet, tiring, costly. And maybe, she thought, that's what made it real. She stood at her kitchen window, staring out into the evening, somewhere across the city. James was probably doing the same. She didn't pick up the phone, not yet. The late October light filtered through the scratched windows of the community hall on East Grand Boulevard. The building smelled faintly of paint thinner and old wood, like something that had been waiting too long to be made useful again. James stood at the back wall, sleeves rolled past his elbows, brush in hand, painting over a water-stained patch that had warped the plaster. The drop cloth under his boots shifted with each step, but he didn't look down. No press, no photographers, no board members in suits, just a quiet Saturday, and a man fixing what he could reach. The funding transfer had gone through that morning. He didn't use the Whitaker name. He didn't even use his own. The check came from a holding company no one would trace. What mattered was the center now had money to repair its plumbing, replace cracked windows, and above all, keep offering free classes to the kids Olivia taught. He didn't know she'd come. When she stepped into the room, the echo of her shoes was soft, but not unnoticed. He didn't turn, just kept brushing, slow and even. The wall looked better already, less like something forgotten, more like something trying again. She stood a few feet behind him, watching, listening. "My father used to say," James said, still facing the wall, "never put money into something that doesn't return profit." I believed him, for a long time, or maybe I just didn't want to prove him wrong. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on the line where the fresh paint met the old. "I don't need you to fix the whole world," she said finally. James stopped brushing, let the silence stretch. Then he turned, slowly, and looked at her. His shirt was smeared with flecks of white. A bead of sweat ran along his temple, but his eyes were clear, steady. "I know," he said. "I just need you to know I'm not hiding behind his name anymore." The air between them shifted, not softened, not yet, but less sharp. A breeze swept in from the hallway. It caught the edge of Olivia's coat and sent a few strands of hair across her cheek. She didn't tuck them behind her ear. She let them stay, like a thread of something undone. "I haven't forgiven you," she said. "Not completely." James nodded. No pushback, no defense, but I don't want to stop remembering you. The weight of that landed somewhere deeper than apology, deeper than anger. It sat between them like something neither could name, but both could feel. James lowered the brush, set it down gently on the ladder rung. Outside. A child's laugh echoed from the playground across the street, the kind of sound that never asks for anything in return, and neither of them moved. The auditorium at Rivera Community Arts Center felt different that evening. Not quieter children still whispered. Chairs scraped floors, but different in a way that hummed beneath the surface, like something fragile being carefully handed across a room. The folding chairs were mismatched. The projector clicked every few seconds, but for the first time in years, parents filled every seat. Olivia sat near the back, not to distance herself, but to observe. James sat beside her. Neither of them spoke. A woman in the front row had begun to cry. She clutched her purse in her lap as she spoke. Her voice trembled but didn't break. My son. He's bright, but the school said he couldn't keep up. I thought that was it. I thought he'd fall through the cracks like I did. She wiped at her cheek quickly. Now someone's saying he can try again. The audience didn't applaud. It didn't need to. The silence carried more weight than clapping ever could. The Grey Room project had no banners, no logo. It wasn't launched with a press release. Just an idea, a commitment. Free weekend classes, art supplies, mentorship, applications that asked about dreams, not grades. There were no founding credits, no names etched on plaques. When it was James's turn to speak, he kept his hands in his pockets. I was given every chance, he said simply, not because I earned them, but because of where I came from. Some people call that privilege. I call it borrowed time. He looked around the room, scanning the faces of those he didn't know. No one should be measured by what they didn't have. We're not here to fix anyone. We're here to see them. That's all. He stepped back without waiting for a reaction. Olivia didn't follow him with her eyes. She already knew what he looked like when he meant every word. After the meeting, parents drifted out slowly, flyers in hand, hope in small, careful doses. A group of students, middle schoolers, mostly swarmed around Olivia near the door. Miss Olivia, a girl with chipped nail polish, tugged at her coat. Is Mr. James coming back next week? Another chimed in. He helped me with clouds. I didn't know you could use a sponge like that. Olivia crouched to their level, her smile unguarded. If you promise to practice, she said, he just might. The kids laughed, promising too much, as kids always do. James stood a few feet away, watching. He wasn't smiling with his mouth, but something in him eased, like the last knot in a rope letting go. Olivia stood, their eyes met. Still no hand-holding, no declarations, just something steady and wordless passing between them. They left the center side by side, walking out into the dusky air where the sky hung low with the promise of early snow. Neither of them said what this was, but both of them knew it mattered. The sun was soft that afternoon, golden and low, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete behind Rivera Community Arts Center. Olivia stood in her usual spot under the elm tree, easel angled to catch the breeze. Around her, children painted in silence, their focus as complete as if they were handling glass. James arrived late, not with noise, not with anything that asked to be noticed. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, sleeves pushed to his elbows. He didn't approach right away, just stood near the edge of the yard, hands in pockets, eyes on Olivia as if measuring whether this moment had space for him. She didn't look up, but she knew. Julian, a boy barely 8 with paint smudged across his cheeks, spotted James first. He trotted over, a folded sheet of paper clutched in both hands. I drew you, he announced, holding it out. James knelt down, took the picture gently. Crayon strokes shaped a tiny house, a woman with her hair in a bun painting, and a man taller, holding a paint bucket standing beside her. He smiled. That's a good house. Julian pointed. That's you. Miss Olivia said you keep the place clean. James laughed, caught off guard. Did she now? The boy looked serious. Can I call you Dad? Mine's not around anymore. Olivia turned at that. She'd been setting brushes in water, hands steady until then. She didn't interrupt, just watched, waiting. James didn't flinch, didn't correct him. He placed a hand lightly on Julian's shoulder. "I can't be your dad," he said softly, "but I can be here. When you need." Julian nodded once. That was enough. Later that evening, the kitchen in Olivia's small apartment smelled of ginger tea and old pine cabinets. Her mother, wearing a knitted shawl and soft expression, poured 2 cups, one for her, one for James. When he arrived, he stepped inside without fanfare, removed his shoes by the door. Her mother studied him like someone revisiting a book they once read but never finished. Then she nodded toward the table. "Don't hurt her," she said quietly. "She's learned to stand on her own. Took her too long to stop apologizing for it." James met her eyes. "I won't," he said. "Not a promise. A quiet fact." When they were alone again, Olivia walked him to the front step. The night was brisk, full of early autumn stillness. Leaves rustled above, but the street was empty. She stood close, but didn't touch him. "I used to think trust came in grand gestures," she said. "Declarations, sacrifices." James waited. "I don't remember when it started with you," she added, voice barely more than a breath. "But I trust you now, and I didn't plan to." He didn't smile, just reached for her hand. Didn't pull, didn't squeeze, just held it there open. And she didn't let go. The story had started quietly, a name on a flyer, a few excited posts from parents, whispers among students at Rivera. But within weeks, the Grey Room Project was on the local news. Camera crews filmed smiling children painting murals. Volunteers shared sound bites about hope and second chances. It looked, from the outside, like everything was going right. Then came the letters, op-eds in business journals, questions in shareholder meetings. Hightower's board grew restless. They'd tolerated James's odd philanthropic gestures until now. This, they said, was personal, reckless. At a closed-door meeting in a downtown conference room overlooking the river, a senior board member pushed a folder toward James. Inside were financial projections, declines, risk assessments, reputational concerns. Then the question came. "Are you doing this for her?" the man asked. "Or to settle the guilt your last name carries?" James said nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't defend. His gaze drifted beyond the glass walls, to where temporary panels of Rivera children's artwork hung in the lobby below. Bold colors, crooked smiles, a house with a tree, a woman with her hair tied back. He closed the folder, at home, in a second-hand frame above the counter. Olivia had placed one of the children's paintings from the first week of the project. It had a single line written in block letters, "Everyone starts somewhere." That night, Olivia sat across from James on the rooftop terrace of the River Center. The air was cool. A string of lights above them flickered with the breeze. She held a letter in her hand. "Seattle," she said. "They want me to come for a 3-year teaching fellowship. Curriculum design, mentorship, paid housing." James nodded. "It's a good opportunity." "It is." She folded the letter once more. "But they want an answer by Friday." He looked at her. "And you're asking if you should go?" "No," she said. "I'm asking if you'd want me to stay." A pause. "Not for drama, but for truth." "If I ask you to stay," James said, "it sounds like I'm choosing for you." Olivia looked down. He continued. "If I have to choose between Hightower and you, I won't. I'll walk away from the board. I'll build something else. Something that doesn't ask me to abandon what matters." She didn't move, but her voice was tight. "That sounds noble, but I don't need noble. I don't need you to burn down your life." He stood, hands in his pockets. "I'm not burning anything," he said quietly. "I'm just not keeping doors open for people who never walked through them with me." There was a silence between them, not cold, just weighty. Olivia rose too. She stepped toward the edge of the roof, looking out over the blocks of Detroit's east side. Somewhere below, a siren moaned softly in the distance. She spoke without turning back. "If I go, I want to know you'll still be here, not waiting, just still choosing to do what's right." Behind her, James exhaled, not an answer, but something steadier. She didn't look back, but he knew. Something had changed. The Rivera Community Arts Center had never looked like this. Strips of colored fabric lined the ceilings, light filtered in through borrowed spotlights, casting soft halos on the hand-drawn art. A string of twine stretched from wall to wall, each clothespin holding a drawing, a painting, a messy pastel attempt at expression. The exhibit was titled From Shadows to Color. No velvet ropes, no podium, no plaque of sponsors, just a quiet sign near the entrance. "Tell us about someone who believed in you." Guests wandered through slowly. Parents, teachers, former students. Some lingered at pieces longer than others. Some wiped their eyes discreetly. There was no performance here, only presence. Olivia stood at the center of it all, holding a folded program in one hand, her other hand lightly brushing the edge of a child's painting. One card read, "Ms. Olivia believed in me when I only had Fs." Another, in shaky handwriting, said, "The man in the gray sweater helped me tie my paint bag when my hands shook." She didn't read aloud, but she read each one. At the far corner of the room, James stood near a potted ficus, shoulders loose, sweater sleeves pushed up. He didn't try to be seen. He didn't step forward. Not yet. Then, someone did. Michael. He walked in alone. No Jessica. No polished grin. His movements carried the hesitance of someone entering a room that no longer expected him. He spotted Olivia by the wall of student sketches, walked toward her. "I didn't think you'd pull something like this off," he said, tone even. She didn't flinch, neither did I. He waited a beat, as if expecting a cold shoulder, a demand to leave, but she simply turned back to the wall of drawings. Michael took that as his cue and stepped back, merging again with the quiet. James moved next, not deliberately, just slowly, like the moment had called him in. Olivia saw him, didn't call his name, just reached out and took his hand. The press was minimal. A few local outlets. One young woman with a press badge clipped to her lanyard approached with a notepad and hopeful smile. "Excuse me," she said to James, "are you the founder of the project?" James looked at Olivia. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm just someone lucky enough to be part of her world." The reporter scribbled something down, but didn't press further. Olivia didn't speak. She didn't need to. They moved from the center of the room to a quieter edge, standing together, fingers still intertwined. Outside, the sky was folding into that kind of dusk that didn't need music to feel whole. And somewhere in the back row, a little boy tugged his mother's sleeve, pointing to his own painting, a swirl of color, a stick figure with a crooked smile. "Mom," he whispered, "that's her. That's the lady who said I could try again." The last night of the exhibition settled under a gentle rain, the kind that painted the sidewalks silver without soaking through. Inside the Rivera Community Arts Center, the echoes of children's laughter had faded, leaving only soft footsteps and the quiet creak of folding chairs. Olivia knelt by a low table, carefully sorting markers and drying paint trays. The scent of tempera and wet paper still lingered in the air. James was across the room, apron stained, sleeves rolled to the elbow, crouching to peel tape from the backs of picture frames. He worked without a word, moving with the ease of repetition like he belonged there, not as a guest, but as someone who knew how the place breathed. A girl no older than 8 tiptoed up to Olivia. Her braids were loose at the ends, hands clutching a small box, wrapped in newspaper. "It's for you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Olivia smiled and unfolded the wrinkled layers. Inside was a small clay sculpture, rough but careful. A woman. One hand lifted mid-dance, the other clutching nothing but air. At the base, 2 open palms molded beneath her feet. Olivia blinked, touched the edge of the figure's skirt. A slip of paper had been pressed into the clay's underside, now dry and fragile. She unfolded it, to the one who stayed standing when no one caught her. Olivia didn't move for a while. Her fingers gripped the edges of the box as if it could speak to her. Her eyes flicked toward James. He wasn't watching. He was labeling storage bins, humming something low and steady, one knee dusty from kneeling. She looked at him for a beat too long. Then a woman approached, mid-30s, a little boy clinging to her coat. "Ms. Olivia," I wanted to ask. "Is Mr. James around?" My son wanted to say thank you. Olivia pointed gently. "He's back there," she said. "He's always there." The woman followed Olivia's gaze to the back of the room, where James had just stood up, dusting off his jeans, reaching for another frame. The cleanup went on. Slowly, people began to leave, offering waves and hugs, a few quiet words in passing. Olivia walked to the front door, statue still in hand. The rain outside had not stopped. It whispered against the canopy, soft, like breath. James didn't walk over. He didn't have to. She stood at the threshold, eyes tracing the misty dark beyond the courtyard. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You don't have to be the loudest one in the room to make something stay. James looked up from where he was folding the last tablecloth. Their eyes met. A silence passed between them, thick with everything they didn't rush to explain. And in that pause, something real settled. They had been two people from different maps, shaped by systems that were never built to meet, but they'd found a way to carry what the other had dropped, to stand when the other knelt, to stay when the other turned. They weren't the same. They never would be, but they'd chosen the same direction. The gallery lights had dimmed. Most people had gone home, but in one corner, a child's drawing still hung crooked, smudged, quietly defiant. No frame, no fanfare. Just truth, in crayon lines. Somewhere between pride and apology. Two people had chosen not to erase but to continue. Not to fix the past, but to honor it by what they built next. Maybe love doesn't always arrive wrapped in certainty. Maybe it waits, quietly, until both hearts are ready to meet without armor, without defense. And maybe that's enough, or more than enough.